I'm going to show you how to create a complex pricing table, just like this one, using containers and nested tabs. We're going to go over how to create the layout, and of course, we're going to make it responsive as well. We're going to see how to use nested tabs to get buttons like these, so we can show different content for our monthly or yearly subscriptions. But really, what you're going to learn here can be used for all kinds of purposes and all kinds of projects. It is so cool we can now do this using just Elementor without any additional plugins. So let's do it. So the first thing I do when I'm not quite sure how to build something is I try to break it down. Visually, I try to break it down in my head and kind of understand how many containers I'm going to need to get this layout. So definitely we need one large container that is going to just have everything in it. And then one of our containers is going to be the choose your maintenance plan and cancel anytime, so the headings. One of our containers is going to be the tabs. And this is probably going to be its own separate container. Within the actual pricing table, every row, so every feature, and even the prices, is going to be its own container. And within it, we're going to have separate containers for our text, our icons, or text. So basically, we have a layout where we have a container for this, and a container for this, for this, for this, and for this. And then we're just duplicating that as many times as we need to. This is probably going to be its own container. So that's kind of how I'm going to plan this out. And just so I can make everything easier on myself, I'm not going to work directly with the tabs. I'm going to build everything and then I'm going to put it into the tabs. So let's start building. So we definitely need a large container. I'm going to put the direction to column. I'm going to go ahead and go under layout and set the min height to 100 VH. So it's going to be the full height of the page. This is just so I have a better overview of everything. You can obviously customize everything you need to your own preferences, to your own needs. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add in my first container. So I'm going to drag in my container and it's at the top. So I'm going to go into my largest container again, and under justify content, under layout, I'm going to go and set it to center. So we have my container centered over here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just add in my headings. Really simple, but I'm going to duplicate the container first. So the first container gets the heading. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste in the text, center align it. I would give it an HTML tag here if this was a live page. I'm going to go ahead and give it a black color. I'm just going to leave it as inter. No need to style this too much. This is an inter, but it doesn't matter. So then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my heading, cancel anytime, and just put that in here and just make it smaller and make it normal instead of bold. And there we go. That is pretty much our headings done for now. I'm going to go into my container over here because you can see we have a padding here. Because Elementor always adds, by default, it adds a padding to every container. And I usually just remove it because that allows me to add in my own paddings and control everything better. So I just go ahead and I remove it by default. Just unlink this. Now I'm pretty happy with this for the time being. So I'm going to go ahead and not add in my tabs, but I'm going to go ahead and start building this. So we have our container over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in another container. So I'm nesting containers. So the more containers I have, the more control I have, but it's also a little bit harder to manage. You can see over here in the navigator, it can get really confusing really quickly. So let me just zoom in a little bit so we have a better overview of what's going on. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start adding in my other containers. Now the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to nest them. So I'm going to add in my other container and I'm going to duplicate it 4 times. And now they go on top of one another. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my second container over here. So not the largest one, not this one, the second one. So the one that's basically going to be this, right? We're going to turn this container into this. So I'm going to go ahead and go into this one. So the first nested container, I'm going to go under layout and under items, direction, I'm going to set the direction to row horizontal. So that turns it from a vertical layout to a horizontal layout, just like this. Now the first container can be empty. So let's start with this. Let's start with our standard plan. So I'm going to add in my heading. Let's type in standard real quick. And just style it, make it way smaller. And center align it. So that's my heading done. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to copy this text. And now we're going to type in a little bit of CSS. You can avoid this if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and style this, make it black, make it bigger by default. So 1.75 rem should be just about right. And then I want to make this slash and month smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in angle brackets and type in the word span, and then space style equals quotation marks font size, font minus size, colon 1 rem, and finish it off with a semicolon and quotation marks and a closed angle bracket. And then I'm just going to go to the end and just close the span tag. So the word span with a forward dash added in the front in angle brackets. And I want to make it a different weight as well, so I'm going to continue the font size. I'm going to continue with font weight and make it normal. And there we go. That's pretty much everything you need to do to achieve that. I'm going to put that somewhere down below so you can just copy and paste it. So let's move on. So we have our annually here. I'm going to duplicate this again and just copy and paste in the text. And again, change the style. And now, as you can tell, everything's kind of far apart. So I'm going to go into this container. So my standard price container. And I'm going to go under layout, and gap between elements, I'm going to set it to less. Not 0, because 0 is kind of not enough. So I'm going to set it to 10. So that looks much better. So now, once I have everything ready, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this twice. And I'm going to remove the last 2 empty containers. I'm going to keep the first one because obviously we have it over here, because if I remove it over here, then I'm going to just break the layout and it's going to be much more difficult. So just keep this empty container over here. Now, one thing we can do is obviously we can go ahead and unlink the paddings of all 4 of them, which I'm going to do just so I get more control. So just go ahead and go into each individual container and unlink the paddings. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the content, copy the text, and fast forward this a little bit. Now, as you can tell, this content is a little bit different. We have a starts at in front of our first price. So it's the same thing. I just added in the same CSS, the same span style to the starts at. And then it's just like the other 2. Now our next step is really to start building out these rows with our attributes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead into the container that has all of these 4 containers in it, and I'm going to duplicate it. While we only have 2, I'm going to go ahead and go in the first one and just go ahead and unlink the padding on both of them. Now you can tell this is getting maybe a little bit confusing. That is why we're going to be using the navigator. And if you're just working for yourself or for a client, just make sure you name stuff. So give it a name. It's going to save you in the future. But just for the purpose of the tutorial, so we can move faster, I'm not going to name stuff. But just keep that in mind. Just name stuff. It's gonna help you out a lot. I promise. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the containers that have these prices in them. Just so it's a little bit faster, just delete all of them, and I'm going to duplicate the first one 3 times so I get 4 of them. And there we go. That is our basic layout done, essentially. We have a large container with 2 containers. The first one has our headings. The second one has our pricing and our features. Every row in the pricing and the features is in its own container, and every part of it, every attribute, everything is in its own container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a text editor to my first feature here. I'm going to copy and paste in the text. I'm going to, instead of visual, I'm going to go under text in the content, just so I can get rid of the annoying spacing at the bottom that still happens in Elementor for some reason. And now, as you can tell, it's kind of weird over here with the borders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the container, and I'm going to go under items, direction, justify content, center. And then I'm going to go into the larger container, so the row container. So I'm going to have to do that by using the navigator. I'm going to go over here. See, I have this one selected, so the small one. I'm going to go into the larger one, so I have this one selected now. I'm going to go under style, background type, and I'm just going to give it a color. I already have a color prepared. You can prepare your own color. And as you can see, it goes to the edges. We don't want that. So let's go into our container first, into our small container, into our feature container here. Go under advanced, and at padding, I'm going to set the padding to percentages. I like to work with percentages. They are a little bit more responsive than pixels. And I'm going to give it 2% on the left, 2% on the right, 1.5 at the bottom, and 1.5 at the top. Now don't worry about this. This is way more than 1.5. But once we add in our content over here, it's going to be 1.5. So no worries about that. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go into my row container again. Go under style. So this container, go under style. And I'm going to give it a border radius. So I round out the edges. So I'm going to give it a border radius of, let's say 30, just for the sake of it. And now as you can see, I have these rounded edges going on over here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in an icon over here. So I'm starting off with icons. So I'm going to go ahead and add in an icon. Again, I'm going to go into the container, justify content, center. So I center the icon vertically. I'm going to choose an icon. This one is from the icon library. So I think it's a check mark. There we go. I'm just going to add in this check mark, insert. And then I want to get this color. Now, the way I get colors usually is I use Mozilla Firefox. So in Mozilla Firefox, I'm just going to right click, inspect. And once I do that, I'm going to go over here, this little eyedropper tool, press it, and you can now just copy any color from any website. It's a really cool trick. So I'm gonna just, oh, I missed it. So I'm just going to copy this color. And in my icon over here, I'm going to go under style and give it the color. And there we go. And I'm just going to decrease the size. I'm going to make it maybe 25. Let's do it 25. And as you can tell, the icon isn't perfectly center aligned. I'm not sure why that is. It always just happens in Elementor. I can even measure this out and just confirm it's not center aligned. Like this is 36 pixels, and from over here it's more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my icon, go under advanced, and give it a padding in pixels. Give it 5 pixels or 4 pixels at the top, and now it's perfectly center aligned. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this container twice and just delete those two. Now it would be a little bit more efficient if I didn't, copy and delete them all the time, but it doesn't really matter, because if I didn't do that, it would be harder to see it visually. So if I just had one icon and one text, I wouldn't really see how large everything is, because as you can see, until you actually add in everything, you're not really going to see the paddings and stuff. So once I do that, once I have everything added in, I can see that 1.5% at the bottom is definitely not enough. So I'm going to go into my container over here, and I'm going to make the padding at the bottom 3.5 and padding at the top 3.5% again. Now this is looking much better, still not perfect, so I'm going to make it 7%. And that is looking pretty much the way I want it to. Now the thing is, the reason why I set it to 7% here and I had it at way less than 7% here is that we need to go into our container over here and we need to make it a little bit bigger, because there's really no point in having our text squished up and having our icons have this much space around them. So the way we do that is I'm going to go into my container, and at content width, I'm going to set it to full width. So this is the container with my text here, right? My text container. And at width, I'm going to set the percentages to 40. I think is going to work just about fine. Now this is all messed up and it looks bad right now, but let's just go into all of our containers and do the same thing. So I'm going to go into the second container, full width. I'm going to set it to 20%. And I'm going to do that for all of the remaining ones. Full width, 20%. And now everything's looking much better, but the padding is now way, way too big. So I'm going to go into my first container and make the padding 2% at the top and 2% at the bottom. And this is starting to look much better. Now the thing is, this is not aligned at all. So what we do is we're just going to go do the same thing. Set this to full width and just make the percentages the same as on the bottom. So I'm going to set each of the remaining ones to 20. And now we have this. And this is aligned. As you can tell, this is aligned with this. And that is pretty much all you need to do to get this layout. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this larger container. So if I click here, it goes into the small container. So I'm going to go use the navigator to target the larger container and just duplicate. And then I'm going to go into style. Under color, I'm just going to clear this in the background. And then I'm just going to change the content, copy and paste the content. You would achieve this the same way. Instead of using an icon, you just use the text editor. But I'm not going to do that, just so we get through this a little bit faster. So if you want to, just use a text editor instead of an icon. Let's add in this icon, so an X icon, so we don't have this feature on this plan. I'm going to go into my icon library again. I'm going to try to find the X. And there we go, it's over here. And I'm going to make it a different color. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy the row container, so the whole container, duplicate it. And once I do that, I'm going to target my first container, so the first row container here. In my navigator, I'm going to right click and I'm going to press copy. And then I'm going to go into my third container. I'm going to right click and paste style, just so I'm pasting that background color. And now as you can see, there's a spacing between all of the rows. We don't want that, so I'm going to go into my larger container. So the largest container that has all of these rows in it. Layout, gap between elements, and I'm going to set it to 0. And now everything's a little squished together, so I'm going to go into my first row container. So the assistant setting up your own hosting. Advanced, user margin, so I'm going to go under margin. And I'm going to unlink this. And I'm going to set it to percentages. And I'm going to set it to 5% on the top, or actually 2%. And now that is pretty much all there is to it. I'm just going to go ahead and fill out the content, copy and paste everything, and then we're going to put it in the tabs, and then we're going to make it responsive. Oh, and one more thing, once I duplicate this content over here, and before I change out the content, since I want this gray, white, gray, white, gray, white color scheme, and now I have gray, white, white, gray, I'm just going to go ahead and go into my navigator, and I'm going to drag the container to the bottom. And I'm going to do the same for all of them. So I'm going to duplicate this and then drag it below the lowest one. And again, duplicate the white one and drag it down. So you just do that however many times you need to. Changing the content, it's really as easy as just, instead of using an icon, using a text editor or using a different icon and just changing the text. That's all there is to it. Obviously, you can change your paddings and your colors over here. But let's just say this is my finished product. What I'm going to do now, since I have all of the content I want, is I'm going to go into the largest container, advanced, and I'm going to unlink the padding, right? I'm going to unlink the padding, and then I'm going to give it a padding at the top of 2%, just so, or 3 actually, just so I can move it a little bit away from the headings. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate the heading container, drag it to the bottom, remove one heading, and at this heading, we have this chicken. Let's get started. So I'm going to just copy and paste that in. And I'm going to align it to the left. I'm going to add in a button as well to my container over here. And now I want this to be on the left and this on the right. How do I do that within one container? Well, I'm going to go into my container over here. And under direction, items, layout, direction, I'm going to go row horizontal. And that does everything it needs to. And then I'm just going to style it, give it some padding. On the left, 3%, 3% on the right, 5 on the bottom, 5 on the top. Actually, 3 everywhere. Just give it a background color. I'm going to give the heading a different color. I'm going to make it white. And I'm going to make it a little bit bolder. And again, it's not perfectly aligned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the container. Layout, justify content. It has to be set to space between, so we get our heading on the left and our button on the right. And under align items, I'm going to set it to center. So now it's center aligned. So now let me just style the container. I'm going to go into the style. I'm going to give it a border radius again of 30 pixels. Then I'm going to go into my button and I'm going to style the button. So I go under style. I'm going to set the text color to primary, so my purple. I'm going to set the color to white, so the background color is white. I'm going to set the border radius to as rounded as possible, so 100. And then I set the hover, I'm going to set the text color, I'm going to keep the text color as is. I'm going to set the color to the purple. So we get this little hover effect. I'm just going to make the font a little bit bolder. And there we go. This is our container done. So now let's just add in this. So this is going to be another heading. So I'm just going to duplicate this container again. Clear all of the styling. Clear the border. Remove the content. Remove the button, actually. I'm going to keep the heading. And I'm going to copy and paste in the text. Center line it. Give it a black color. Make it thinner. And in my container, I'm just going to set the justify content to center. And let's just preview this. Let's see what we're working with. This is pretty much what I want, right? It's pretty much the same thing as here. It's just not as styled and there's way less content. So the next thing we have to do is we have to put this into tabs. Now let's go ahead and duplicate this container. Duplicate the heading container. And let's clear it. Let's delete the headings. And we're going to go ahead and add in our tabs. So I'm going to go into my widgets and just drag in the tabs. So once I did that, first off, I don't need 3 of them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, under contents tabs, I'm going to delete the third one. In the first one, I'm just going to type in monthly under title. The second one, title, annually 1 month free with lowercase letters. All that I need to do now is style this. So let's style this real quick. I'm going to keep the direction as is. I want it to be at the top. I want to justify it to the center. I want to align this title to the center. So everything as is. I want responsive settings. I want the breakpoint to be, doesn't really matter because we're not going to do it this way anyhow. But if you want to, you can turn the tabs into an accordion on tablet already or just on mobile. But we're not going to need that. So I'm going to go into my style. Gap between tabs, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, make it 25. Distance from content, I'm going to see how that is later, but let's make it 25 just to be safe. Background type, I'm going to set the background type to white, actually, yeah, white, so unless it's active. And I'm going to give it a border type, solid. I'll give it a border of 1, border width 1, border color, I'm going to give it a purple. Actually, I'm going to give the border width, make it 2. And then the border radius, I'm just going to set it to 100 again. So I get these nice, rounded, beautiful buttons. Then I'm going to go under titles. I'm going to set the typography and I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to set my color to primary. And my hover color and active color are fine already. You can obviously style this for your titles, for your tab backgrounds, for your icons. If you're going to add in an icon, I'm not going to, but of course you can add in an icon over here. Under monthly, you can just add in your icon over here. We're not going to do that, but you can if you want to. And that's pretty much it for the tabs. Now, if we go into my navigator, you're going to see tabs over here, and you're going to see tab 1 and tab 2. They basically work like normal containers, like nested containers. As you can see, we can add in our content over here. But we already have our content, so how do we do that? We're going to go into our container that has all of these pricings and features and all of that stuff. And we're going to just go ahead and open the tab 1. Open this up. And we're just going to go ahead and drag it in. Just like that. And now if I change from monthly to annually, you can see our monthly does have the content and our annually does not. So the only thing left to do really is to go ahead and duplicate this container. And I'm going to drag the second one into tab 2. And now we have our yearly prices and now we have our monthly prices. And I'm just going to go into my monthly prices and I'm going to change them. Make them more expensive, just like they originally are over here. Just so we have that difference in content. Now the thing is, you can change any content. Obviously, you can, in your monthly, you can show a completely different set of content than in your annually. That's the beauty of these new nested tabs. Is you can really put in any content because you're just pretty much working with normal containers. Let's check it out on our front end. Keep in mind, you can style this much better, just like I did over here. This looks much better because I spent a little bit more time on it. But the principle is identical. The principle is the same. You can very easily get something like this if you just put in a little bit more time, but I don't want to keep you for too long unnecessarily. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my tab 1 again, tab 1, advanced, and I'm going to unlink the padding, and I'm going to do the same for the tab 2. So tab 2, advanced, unlink the padding, just so we have our content going to the edges, just like all of the other content. So now let's make this responsive. Now the issue with tabs is that if I try to make this responsive, let's go into our mobile and you're going to see what happens. There is really no way to disable this on mobile right now. Your tabs are going to turn into an accordion on mobile. If you go into responsive and you set it breakpoint to tablet, it's going to happen on tablet as well. So we're not going to be actually using tabs for our mobile view. So we're going to go into our container, the one container that has our tabs in it. We're going to go under advanced and we're going to go to responsive. But over here, we're going to set it to hide on tablet and hide on mobile. So this container is not going to show up on either tablet or on mobile. So for our tablet view and for our mobile view, we're actually going to do it like this. We're just going to use regular containers. We're not going to be using tabs. So let me show you how to do this with regular containers. Now I'm going to leave this as is, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new container, direction column. I'm going to go ahead and add in my first container, just like before. And in this container, I'm going to go under advanced, responsive, and I'm going to hide it on desktop. Then I'm going to go into my responsive mode and go into my tablet view. I'm going to start adding in my content basically. First off, I'm going to go under my container style and give it a background color and the border radius, just like we did before. Now I'm going to go into my tabs and I'm going to start copying the content. Now, if this is confusing you, you can go ahead and unhide the container. So show it on tablet just so you have a better overview, which is actually what I'm going to do. So the container I just hit, I'm going to go ahead and go into responsive and I'm going to show it on tablet. Then I'm just going to copy the content to my container over here. I'm going to go into the container now. I'm going to go under advanced and I'm going to give it some padding. I'm going to give it 5 padding on the left, 5 on the right, 10 on the top and 10 on the bottom. Then I'm going to go into layout and I'm going to set the gap between elements to 10 because it's a little bit much. The next element I'm going to add is I'm going to go into my widgets and I'm going to search for icon and I'm going to add in an icon list. So this is going to allow us to get this very simply. When I put it in, it got dragged outside of the container, as you can see. So I'm just going to drag it into the container. And if I can't do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my navigator and drag it between these elements and then just reorder them as I need to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete all but the first list item. Then I'm going to go ahead and add in the icon, the check icon. I'm just going to go ahead and give it the same color. So I'm going to go into my icon over here, go under style and get the color. And under style over here, icon, I'm going to give it over here. And then I'm just going to make the icon a little bit bigger. 15, 20 pixels is going to be just about fine. In my text, I'm going to make it dark, black. Then I'm just going to go ahead and into my text editor, assistant setting up your own hosting in emails, copy this, go into my icon list, go under content, choose the first one, and just copy it under text. And now all I need to do is just duplicate it. So we do that by just pressing this over here, these little 2 pages, just as many times as you need to. Then it's really just a matter of adding in your content. Now the difference here is that you would add in your content like this. So over here, your content is pretty much, this is included and this isn't. So on mobile, what isn't included, you just don't include it. So you just add in the included. So just the check marks, the green check marks. We're not going to be doing this over here. So now you can see this is a little squished together and it doesn't really have enough of a space at the top. So I'm going to go into my icon list, go under advanced. First off, I'm going to give it some padding. And then I'm going to go into style and I'm going to set the space between to 20. The next thing I can do is to get these contact me buttons, just add in a button widget and just style it any way I want. I'm just going to copy and paste the style from that one and just make the normal state color, background color, my primary and my text color white. I'm just going to center align it and just give it some padding. And now if I go into my mobile view, This is pretty much perfect. I wouldn't change this much, maybe some padding, maybe some size issues. And what I would do then is just really duplicate this container and give it a margin at the top, or control everything by going into my largest container and controlling the gap between elements so I can move them further apart from each other, just like this. And this is not going to be visible on my desktop view. So now I'm just going to go ahead back into my container, and I'm going to hide this for tablet again. And let's check out what we created. Now here's our pricing table. We have a heading, we have another heading, we have our tabs with the changing content. And then if I inspect this and try to make it responsive and go responsive, it's completely broken. So the way we're going to fix that is we would hide this, just hide this for mobile and tablet. Hide this as well. And instead of showing it over here, we're just going to add it to our container over here. So let's just do that real quick. So I'm just going to copy this, right? I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it in here. And I'll do the same for this one. You have to get it between the border right over here, otherwise it's going to nest it automatically. So once I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and go into these two and advanced, responsive, hide on tablet, hide on mobile, both of them. And then I'm going to go into my largest container, so the first container, and I'm going to set the min height to 0. So that is going to not force it to have a minimum height on tablet and on mobile. Over here we have this. These two you would need to also hide, so responsive, hide on desktop, responsive, hide on desktop. Probably add in some paddings. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just add in some paddings over here. And I'm going to make the layout and go under layout and justify content center. So this is what we get. You can see how easy it is to work with containers and to get really pretty complex layouts going. If you add in too many containers or not enough containers, it's not a problem. You can just nest them, move them around using the navigator. Don't be afraid to mess up. Now, another thing that is good to keep in mind is that once you try to get this layout, you're not going to want your every container to be the same width. So make sure you go into individual containers, set the content width to full width for every one of them, and then set your percentages. That's going to give you this nice layout. That's really the most important part. And after that, it's just playing around with paddings, margins, backgrounds, and just duplicating your content to get whatever you want out of it. Now, one thing you might notice is this tabs button is a little funky. So now the reason for that is that we have a border set to our normal state, but we don't have a border set to our hover or active state. So the way you fix that is just go into your hover state, give it a border, same width. And in my case, I want to control the color by making it the same color as my background color. So now that effect is gone. And I'm going to do the same for the active one. Go border, solid, 2 pixels, and give it the purple color. Oh, and under our icon list, let's go under our icon list, style, alignment, center. Make sure that is centered so we get this nice effect. And when we're making our pricing table responsive, since we cannot use tabs to indicate monthly, annually, what we can do is just add in a container, add in our text editor, and change out the content a little bit. 1 month free when paid annually. And then we just style it, make it really stand out. And then we can just style the container, give it a background color, whichever color you want. I'm going to put it to white. I'm going to give it a border radius because we're doing border radiuses. And then just give it a little bit of a padding top and bottom. And now you have pretty much the same thing, pretty much the same content happening over here as you do on your desktop view. And that's really how you make this responsive, but it's just as well because this on mobile, there's just no way this is going to work because it's way too wide. And trying to make this actual layout work on mobile, I think it's going to be a nightmare if it's even possible. So this is by far the smoothest option. You saw how easy it is to build this out. All you have to be aware of is, first off, in your mind, break it down into containers. Once you break it down, make sure that this is set to rows. Don't forget about setting each individual container to full width and setting the width over here, and do that for all of them. The last thing I would probably do is go into my largest container, go under advanced padding percentages, and give it 5% on the left and 5% on the right, just so we get a little bit more responsiveness going. And that's pretty much it. You can see this is the exact same layout as over here. The only difference is the sizes are a little bit different, the paddings are a little bit different, and there's not as much content. The content isn't as polished, and pretty much all that's left is for you to style this however you want. If you run into any issues, let me know down below. I'll do my best to help out. I hope you found this video helpful. For more awesome content like this, check out this video next and make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Thank you for watching.